Business has always been about turning a profit, making money. But can it stand for something more? Something beyond dollars and cents? We think so. We think that today, business has a higher calling, a purpose to be fair and just, to do right by their workers, customers, communities, and the environment. And it turns out companies successful doing that also do better for their bottom line. When you see the Just Capital seal, it means this company is a force for good. Visit justcapital.com to learn more.
Caucuses. Former President Trump won 98 out of 99 Iowa counties in the Republican caucuses. Now, the one county that did not go for Trump was Johnson County, where former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley led Trump by just one vote, with 99% of the votes counted. Haley finished third statewide behind Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Trump polled in the majority of votes with 51%. The Dow coming in for a closing loss today of 232 points. Settling at 37,361. The S&P 500 down 18 and the NASDAQ down 28 points coming off the three-day holiday weekend. Stocks were up last week. Traders began this week with some caution on that latest batch of earnings reports from some of the biggest investment houses on Wall Street, and downbeat manufacturing news also out today. And the Fed Reserve Governor Christopher Waller made some comments first thing this morning, saying the Fed will likely cut rates this year, but that the shift in monetary policy does not have to be rushed, in his word. In turn, the stocks did move lower, and bond yields did pop a bit higher. Another thing that we're watching, the Fed's next move, another policy pause widely expected now at the Fed's January meeting, but there had been a 68% chance that central bankers would carve the Fed funds rate down a quarter point to at their March meeting. The Fed Watch tool indicates that inch lower to a 63% chance soon after Waller's comments today. Also, we got the earnings news from Goldman Sachs, the big dog on Wall Street. That stock moved higher today. Morgan Stanley shares moved lower, and PNC Financial Services reports all came out ahead of the opening bell on Wall Street this morning. The manufacturing report we got today was the New York Fed Factory Index, falling sharply from negative in December to negative this month. In fact, the lowest we've seen since May of 2020 during the pandemic days. That is pretty significant. Investors, of course, also continue to watch what's happening in the Middle East with heightened tensions, raising fears that the disruption of shipping through the Red Sea might add to inflationary pressures. We did see oil, though, move a bit lower today. Morgan Stanley shares are down about nearly 5% today. Goldman Sachs up nearly 1%. Taking a look at another big story, of course, a federal judge today blocking JetBlue Airways' proposed $3.8 billion acquisition of Spirit Airlines, agreeing with the Justice Department's assertion that the deal would eliminate a competitor important to price-conscious travelers. Now, that decision sent Spirit stock down 47%, while shares of JetBlue rose 5%. Also prompted analysts to speculate about the near-term health of Spirit Airlines, as well as about a potential domino effect among several carriers. Looks like it's unlikely JetBlue and Spirit will appeal that decision. Consumer advocates hailing this decision, by the way. Well, who says inflation is no longer a problem? It turns out Americans, many of them, can no longer afford their cars. Both new and used car prices soared to record highs during the pandemic, and now they're up 30% since 2020, the pandemic year. EV costs are especially onerous, as we've seen recently with Hertz planning to unload most of its EV fleet, largely due to high costs and a lack of consumer demand. I'll discuss all that tonight with our car expert, Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. It's a nervous time again in the restaurant business here in California, with California's new fast food minimum wage bill law about to kick in about a month and a half from now. Already, Pizza Hut laid off about 1,200 delivery drivers. Some restaurants have completely shut down already. As of the first of the year, now many workers in the fast food business are looking for other work, getting set to be fired or replaced by robots, iPads, or other technology. I'll discuss that tonight with restaurateur and small business champion Angela Marsden, owner of Pineapple Hill Saloon and Grill in Sherman Oaks and host of the SOS Los Angeles Family Food and Little Guy Show, which airs right here on 790 KBC Saturdays at 1 p.m. But first, on your money, the markets, and the economy. Joining us live now for our occasional Frank and Stein conversation. You guessed it. We're joined now by the one and only Ben Stein, financial and political commentator, also author, economist, lawyer too, and host of Win Ben Stein's Money. He's a game show host as well as a famous actor, too, and one of the most famous scenes in American cinema. Played basically himself, the economics professor in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ben Stein, thank you for joining us for Frankenstein. Good afternoon to you, sir.
How are you, sir? How are you?
Wonderful.
Mostly to your comments about robots at the food place, they can't be any worse than what's there already.
Well, you got looks like barbacks and the food runners being replaced by robots. I saw that recently at a place that I was at over the weekend. So it is happening. But first of all, your reaction to the big election news. First of all, with former President Trump taking the prize last night.
Well, I would say, with all due respect to you, my longtime pal, that's the smallest of small news. Everybody expects him to win by a lot. He did win by a lot. He's charismatic. Neither of the other candidates is, except I do like DeSantis a lot, but I think he should have waited for 4 years to run. But I like him very, very much. I like Mr. Trump a lot. So we'll see what's happening. I was just telling a very close friend that what's happened in the White House right now in terms of the absence without leave, so to speak, of the Secretary of Defense, without the president knowing where he was, it's such an astonishing slap in the face at constitutional government that it's just unbelievable that Mr. Austin has not been asked to resign.
On there live with the one and only Ben Stein. If you can put your legal hat on for a moment.
Yes, my legal hat, sir.
Yes, please. And discuss the legal that case in New York that's continuing with former President Trump today. What about all of the legal challenges here which continue to play out as this political season officially begins?
That is also a slap in the face of the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution about presidents being elected by judges or by juries. The Constitution says that the presidents are to be elected by the voters, and once they're elected, there's no provision in the Constitution where they're being removed by prosecutors. There's nothing in that at all. There are propositions in the Constitution for people being removed from the White House by specific means, which we've seen played out, such as impeachment, which has never actually once been done all the way to the conclusion. But for the judges and juries and prosecutors to step in and nullify the results of elections, there's nothing like that in the Constitution. And this is just something that's been made up in the last few months by the Democrat Party to, slam the door on the Republicans. To me, it's appalling that this is happening in a constitutional democracy.
Right. You had a ringside seat back in the 70s, what was happening back in those days. Right. So why don't you reflect for us on how things have evolved? It was obviously a big deal when President Nixon resigned back then. What happened? And then Gerald R. Ford, who was not elected, by the way, ultimately took over as president. And what are your thoughts about how this whole situation has evolved here now with President Trump?
I cannot believe what's happening. I can't believe it happening in front of my eyes. I can't believe that without an impeachment vote in the Congress, without a conviction vote in the Senate, the president, very likely, certainly he's not in office now, probable future president is going to be barred from taking office by a prosecutor. It's incredible. There are prosecutors in practically every county in every state in the union. So do we have thousands of prosecutors who can block the Constitution? I mean, is that what's become of us?
On there live with Ben Stein, something else I think you had a ringside seat for. 45 years ago, the establishment of diplomatic relations between the People's Republic of China and the United States of America, something the Chinese will be celebrating this month. What are your thoughts about U.S.-China relations at this point, given the tensions rising there in the Taiwan Strait?
Well, I sorry it's turned out that way. I think we had in the Nixon days, we had much more hope for a peace-loving.
It could be information to change your life forever. Or the Something You Should Know podcast could just be something interesting.
Well, one person who understands dogs better than most is Jen Golbeck, and she is author of a book called The Purest Bond, Understanding the Human Canine Connection.
People who went on weight loss plans with their dog lost more weight, and it's just a really interesting connection about how our own weight and our dog's weight is tied together.
Something You Should Know, wherever you listen.
What companies deserve your hard-earned dollar? Which would you want to work for? How can you know if they share your values? Just ask us. Just Capital is a nonprofit that tracks who really means business in supporting workers, customers, communities, the environment, and shareholders. We measure progress, track success, and help them be better. When you see the Just Capital seal, you know what's real, because just business is better business. Visit justcapital.com to learn who makes your dollar count.
China and China that would just be content raising the standard of living of its people, but that has not happened. I mean, what's happened instead, I'm sorry to say, is that China has used its very considerable industrial might to build up a large armed force. But I don't see them attacking Taiwan yet. I mean, the Taiwanese are pretty damn tough. They're they're not a tiny island, and they're not right next door to China. And I don't think there's any evidence that China has amphibious capacity to invade them.
All right, you're watching what's happening in the Middle East. We've had many conversations since Israel was attacked by the Hamas terrorists back in October, and we're watching now what's happening with the U.S. clashing with the Houthis in the Red Sea region. Give us an update on what you see happening there in the Middle East and in the Red Sea at the moment.
I think we're at war with Iran. I mean, I think the White House is reluctant to say it. The Defense Department is reluctant to say it. I think striking at the selective targets is not going to work. Iran basically wants to be at war with the United States without the United States using the atom bomb. And this idea that I see on TV all the time that we're going to demoralize and degrade the Houthis, that's not going to work. These guys are maniacs. These guys are psychopathic killer maniacs. We're not going to degrade and discourage them. We have to kill them.
We're lucky to have you on the air. I thought you might be in Davos, but we're happy to reach you here today, Ben Stein.
I don't want to go to Davos. I don't want to go anywhere.
Cold.
I'm very happy being in Los Angeles, California.
I don't blame you. Well, that's why the real estate people will tell you, all real estate here in Southern California is free. What you pay for is the weather, and certainly we can understand that on a beautiful day like today. But we have the president of Ukraine in Davos looking for additional funds. What about how this war is playing out, Ben Stein?
They are the heroes of our generation. We are really lucky to have them on planet Earth. They have stood up to the Russians, only people since 1945 to do it, and we owe them a lot. And I'm glad we're helping them, and I hope we keep helping them. And I hope Western Europe keeps helping them. The Ukrainians in the past were terrible, vicious anti-Semites. Now they have a Jewish president, and they're being the bravest people on earth. But I've got to go in just a minute, even though I love being with you. So I'll just say Bueller, and then I will leave you to your own money-making devices.
It sounds like you have an important early bird special dinner date, perhaps. So we're going to take that cue.
Early bird dinner dates. I don't get early bird dinner dates. I make dinner for my wife.
That's wonderful. That's the best date of all. That is the best date of all, and I have a feeling you'll say that, of course. Well, Ben, we wish you a wonderful afternoon and evening. Thank you very much for joining us here for our Frankenstein conversation.
I'm sorry to leave you early, but let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. It's always great to speak with the one and only Ben Stein here for our occasional Frankenstein conversation. Yeah, that was Ben Stein, the financial and political commentator, of course, author of books including The Gift of Peace by Ben Stein and many others. Right now, let's get right out to the freeways here on 790 KBC. Well, politics back in the spotlight with the Iowa caucuses now in the history books. President Trump winning last night. We got a pessimistic take on the prospect of a 2024 presidential election rematch between President Biden and former President Trump from billionaire investor Ray Dalio today, the founder of Bridgewater Associates. He gave an interview with CNBC at the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, Switzerland. Dalio said it's his biggest worry, whether both sides will accept the outcome of the election, and moreover, the potential for clashes between the far left and far right that could threaten the authority of the U.S. So we're watching, of course, what's happening on the political scene during this political year with the presidential election coming up in November. One major Wall Street bank weighing in on what it calls an extreme scenario in which no group of 10 central banks cut interest rates this year due to sticky inflation, strong economic growth, or fresh shocks that push price gains higher. According to MarketWatch, in a note today, a UK-based FX strategist at Bank of America said it's worth considering the implication of a seemingly unrealistic scenario in which major central banks stay on hold. For now, markets are pricing in about 6 interest rate cuts from the Fed as well as the European Central Bank starting in March and April. Taking a look at some of the other important readings we're watching. We're watching, of course, the price of oil, which actually pulled back a bit today despite the rising tensions in the Red Sea in the Middle East. We see oil down 47 cents, now 71.93. Gold down $1 at 2,029. Money continues here on 790 KABC. Good afternoon. We are doing it live now in the 4 o'clock hour. Doing more in 24 at 4 in the afternoon. Mottek On Money live with you here on 790 KABC. Well, it's interesting times in the car business these days with weakening demand, declines in consumer spending, and a more competitive electric vehicle market, all leading several car makers now to cut plans to produce more electric vehicles and prices of existing cars. Hertz, for example, announced last week that it'll be selling roughly a third of its fleet of electric vehicles, or about 20,000 of its fleet of cars that are predominantly Teslas, and that signaled, as CNBC notes, a further reversal away from Hertz's previously stated goal of converting at least 25% of its entire fleet of cars to EVs by the end of this year. And it turns out a lot of people can no longer afford their cars. Both new and used car prices soared to record highs during the pandemic days, and by the way, they're up 30% since the pandemic year 2020. EV costs especially onerous, as we've seen recently, with Hertz planning to unload most of its EV fleet, largely due to high cost and lack of consumer demand. Following all this closely, let's bring in our go-to car expert now, Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. Happy New Year, Lauren. It's wonderful to have you with us here this afternoon.
Well, thank you, and Happy New Year to you as well. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the car world, and we just got off the Consumer Electronics Show, and then sure enough, a week later, we've got Hertz saying, you know what, we bought 100,000 Teslas. We can't rent these, and if they can't rent them, that's an issue. The insurance for them is higher, as well as the maintenance, because tires wear out quicker, and if there's an accident, they got to get components and parts from Tesla, and they're more expensive. So they're saying, you know what, we're going to sell almost 25% of our fleet, and they're canceling other electric vehicle orders because people don't want to rent those because you got to bring them back with a full charge.
I'm so glad you were able to come to the line. I thought maybe you were going out and getting one of those used Teslas from Hertz today. What is your advice for consumers who are being offered these cars now?
Well, you know, it's funny. Used electric vehicles have a lot of issues. A lot of people, I would highly suggest that if you're really considering one of these used cars from Hertz or any other used electric vehicle, get an ASE certified technician who specializes in electric vehicles to look at it. And that could even be the brand, whether it's Ford or Honda or whatever brand that it's electric vehicle, a Nissan Leaf, whatever that may be. Go and have them check it out, because you'll find that some of them have recalls, and you want to get those updated, of course. But you also want to find out, is this vehicle had a problem with the battery? What's the battery life that's left? And you're finding people buying like old Prius or Prius I, they might be if there's more than one. If you look at the old Toyota Prius, people buy them even if the battery power portion of it doesn't work, because they're still great fuel-efficient cars. But when you're talking about an all-EV, if the battery has X amount of life on it, like a used cell phone, that's going to impact your investment into it, because you may need a new battery, which could be more than the cost of the vehicle itself.
Of course, the big selling point for electric vehicles, was supposed to be they're supposed to save money on gas. You don't have to pay gas anymore. But obviously, we've had a long track record now with electric vehicles, and you've done all of your homework. How much more is it to have an EV compared to a gas-powered car?
Over the long haul, it does cost you more. Your monthly payments will be higher, but you were getting that $7,500 tax credit. Now, as of 2024, only 10 vehicles qualify, and only the Tesla Model 3 and Y that are performance models qualify. So if you want the regular Tesla Model 3 or Tesla Model S, they don't qualify anymore. It's really important to know that as of November 8th of last year, the California EV program has run out of funds. So they call it the CVRP. They are closed to new applications. So if you think you're going to get the $7,500 from the federal, if you have one of those 10 cars that you decide on, you will not be getting matching state credit. And that is going to impact your monthly payment. It would be nice if you could start stacking these all up. Maybe your company offers something. Then really it could cost you not much at all. You could get into a Fiat 500e for $49 a month. That would make sense to anybody. But when you lose that tax credit from the state, that's a problem. And they're not planning to replenish it because the state's already upside down in its funds, so they can't afford to replenish that clean vehicle rebate. Chicago is also, the state of Illinois is also out of it, as well as New Jersey. So you're starting to see a lot of states saying, we thought we were going to offer, $4,000, $5,000. That's completely out the window now. And remember that federal tax credit is really limited down to very few cars. I can actually tell you those vehicles if you'd like to know.
Yes, well, we have time to do that, Lauren. So as a public service, go right ahead. Okay,
so here are some vehicles that you probably want to know that qualify for the current federal $7,500 tax credit. If you can find one, a Chevy Bolt EV, and I say that because they're not going to make them anymore, and they're the lowest priced vehicle that qualifies at $26,000. The Chevrolet Equinox EV, very limited of those available. The Ford F-150 Lightning, there's lots of those available. Tesla Model 3 performance only. Chevrolet Silverado EV, which is not available to the latter half of the year. Tesla Model Y performance only. The Chrysler Pacifica, the minivan, the plug-in hybrid is eligible for the $7,500 tax credit. They must have made some sort of negotiation because it's also gasoline powered. The Chevrolet Blazer EV, which just came out. I think there's a stock sale on that right now as of yesterday. Cadillac Lyriq, which I haven't seen too many of those, and the Tesla Model X. That's it. If you don't have any of those vehicles, you don't get the tax credit. So General Motors is offering to give you that tax credit. Other brands like Toyota with their BZ4X are offering to give that to you. So check out the manufacturer's website for their tax credit that they're offering you direct from the manufacturer, and then anything else you can gain on top of that to lower the price if you really want an electric vehicle. But plug-in hybrids and hybrids are what people are buying. That's what they want.
On the Air Live with Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast, live here on 790 KABC. And Laura, of course, you've been covering this for quite some time, the demand part of this equation and this high-profile announcement by Hertz citing weakening demand for EVs out there. I remember a year ago we were kind of joking about this, but it's kind of sad, really. Remember when I believe it was GM announced that they had sold 2 electric Hummers, count them 1, 2. Mm-hmm. Do we have any updates on how many they've sold now?
Well, they've sold more. The problem is most areas of the country, they're sitting there. So if you're in California and you're thinking, I'd really like to have one of those Hummers, man, if I could get my hands on one, it's not eligible for the tax credit because it's also very expensive. If you want one, look in other states. Like I'm in Buffalo, New York. There were 6 sitting at the local dealer. And every time I stop in to say, hey, if there's any interest, because I check around at all the different brands, they said they haven't had any interest at all, which means they're going to be more negotiable. I did find an F-150 Lightning at $25,000 off the sticker price. So do your shopping, maybe out of the state, which I don't like to. I like people to buy local, but still check around before you make your final decision. You could be saving a lot more money.
For the first time, I saw one of the new...
How wrestling really works and how you get the ratings. Eric Bischoff and Conrad Thompson explain. on 83 Weeks.
I mean, I dig Jey Uso because he's born out of great storytelling, and he lived up to the opportunity and exceeded it. The LA Knight, he's way up on my list because here's a guy that's been around for almost ever, should have probably quit a half a dozen times, and he just forced his way into their life, and now he's making money hand over fist. That is a story I love.
83 Weeks on YouTube or wherever you listen.
Business has always been about turning a profit, making money. But can it stand for something more? Something beyond dollars and cents? We think so. We think that today, business has a higher calling, a purpose to be fair and just, to do right by their workers, customers, communities, and the environment. And it turns out companies successful doing that also do better for their bottom line. When you see the Just Capital seal, it means this company is a force for good. Visit justcapital.com to learn more.
Tesla trucks in Beverly Hills over the weekend. Are those how are those doing? And have you had a chance to check them out?
I haven't had a chance to check them out. I don't find them to be appealing to the eye, but I will tell you this. What's interesting is they get stuck in the snow. And that's been a problem. If you go on any of the social media platforms and look at Cybertruck in the snow, you'll see they get stuck. And who's pulling them out? Chevy Silverados, Ford F-150s, the Ford or Toyota Tundras. It's actually hysterical that these trucks have so much torque and so much weight that they actually get stuck in the snow, which is far from what they had planned. Again, it's great to plan these things for California where it's beautiful, but if you're going to plan to use it up in the snow, it may not work for you.
All right. Well, it does snow here in Southern California. It never rains, of course, but it does snow. Just kidding about that.
Yes.
Now, what about the House joining the Senate, striking down the Biden EV charger rule protecting Chinese companies? I don't know if you saw the Fox News report on this, but certainly very significant. And your reaction to that?
Well, the House struck it down, so that's good. It was bipartisan, which I really appreciated. But then it's going to go to the Senate. It's highly unlikely that this EV mandate will pass the Senate. If it does, and your communication with your elected officials, your senators, your House of Representatives, telling them, please vote this down, I want to have choice. If it clears the Senate, we know that President Biden's going to veto it. It'll then go back to the House and the Senate. They need 2/3 in the House, so you'll need that House vote, 2/3 in the Senate to override the veto. We know that whoever the next president may be, depending upon whom it is, could support this electric vehicle mandate or could remove it across the entire country. So there's going to be a lot going back and forth. So before you think I've got no choice and I have to buy one, be patient and wait till November if you can. I will tell you this, there's Chinese vehicles coming into the U.S. They will not be eligible for the electric vehicle mandate. They will be low cost. There'll be probably no dealerships. But keep in mind, you will not get a tax credit with those.
All right, and speaking of costs, both new and used car prices, as I mentioned, have soared to record highs during the pandemic, and we've, of course, tracked all of this, you and I have on this program, and last check, auto prices up, about 30% since 2020. What about the cost of getting anything decent nowadays and affordability? And, of course, with interest rates pretty much, certainly with credit card rates at all-time highs, affordability a huge issue at the car lots now.
You're right. Interest rates are higher, and it's causing people to rethink, do I want this vehicle? Can I afford this vehicle? Because it's going to cost you more per month. So that same vehicle maybe 2 years ago would have been a lot less. So when you're adding those interest rates in and it's compounded, be careful not to get caught up in the trap where they tell you we can do your lease for 40 months or 48 months. I've even heard 50 months. Don't fall for that trap. It may make the payments smaller, but you're paying mostly interest rates. You're not paying down the principal. And in the end, you'll be outside the warranty for that vehicle. And then if there's anything that goes upside down or doesn't work, that cost is borne by you. So keep that in mind. Also note the average cost of new cars are up somewhere around $3,000. It will remain up partly to cover the UAW, overhead costs, transportation costs, parts, components. Everything is more expensive. And they're not going to absorb that. They're going to pass that along to you, the customer. They've already cut back on their employees. We've seen lots of layoffs. We've seen lots of white-collar layoffs. That's not good for the economy. That's not good for us either because you're not getting better prices. And it looks like prices are going to remain high. You're also going to see prices remain high in used cars because people that can't afford new cars are saying, maybe I'll buy one that's 2 years old. Great financial move. Buy something or lease something that's 2 years old, somebody used it, Maybe they got all the goodies on it that you want, maybe more. You can get a good deal on those. But again, don't make your payments extended or your lease numbers extended, because you'll end up being upside down, which means you owe more on the vehicle than it's worth.
Very important point there. Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach, co-host of the Total Car Score podcast, and terrific on all of your social media platforms too. Lauren, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Anytime. Thank you.
Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. Good afternoon. We're doing it live in the 4 o'clock hour now here on 790 KBC. Doing more in 24 at 4 in the afternoon for you right here on Mottek On Money. Well, it's nervous time again in the restaurant business here in Southern California, with California's new fast food minimum wage bill about to kick in about a month and a half from now. Already Pizza Hut, you might have heard, laid off 1,200 of its delivery drivers, and some restaurants have already shut down as of the first of the year. The IHOP in West Hollywood, for example, which, by the way, has the highest minimum wage in the United States in West Hollywood. That's what they're paying their folks there, around $18 an hour. Now, many workers in the fast food business seeing the writing on the wall, already looking for other work, getting ready to be fired or replaced by robots, iPads, or other technology. Let's bring in small business hero, restaurateur, Angela Marsden, owner of Pineapple Hills Saloon and Grill in Sherman Oaks, host of the SOS Los Angeles Family Food and the Little Guy Show, which airs here on 790 KBC on Saturdays at 1 p.m. Angela, Happy New Year. Thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
Hey, Frank. Happy New Year to you, too. You're always on top of it, and you're always drawing attention to these issues, and I am very grateful, and I know the small business owners are as well. I think it's sickening, and it's a shame that we have politicians, in particular our governor, who are so inept at creating an environment that actually draws in high-paying jobs and job creators. And what can they do? What can they do other than to overtax and then overpromise to make it look like they're doing their job, when in fact he literally is breaking California. I read one of the articles about the minimum wage for the fast food restaurants going up to $20 an hour. And one of the employees was saying, I don't think they thought this out. I mean, maybe if they had done it gradually, but now I'm looking for a new job. Do you know how many people are going to be looking for a new job? This is a ripple effect of like when you throw a pebble into the creek, the ripples go. This affects small businesses. Do you think I can pay a cook that has to know how to cook several different entrees as much as somebody who doesn't have to know anything other than how to drop a basket with fries the same amount? No. I'm already looking at closing my kitchen early. I'm already going, how can I survive? But this started when they started raising the minimum wage. Every year, sales went down, prices went up. And every year, I was struggling to figure out how I was going to survive. Prior to that, I was raising my sales 20%. My staff in the very beginning, when they started raising minimum wage, period, asked me if they could sign a piece of paper saying they didn't want it, because they understood the consumer can only afford so much. And it's better to have more people in and more people in tipping and more people that can afford to go out to eat than to not have enough and have no job. It's why you go out and you go to get service and you get bad service, because you have one employee trying to serve everybody, because we cannot afford it. You can only sell McDonald's Big Macs, which, by the way, I read an article, and McDonald's says they're projecting their Big Mac is going to go up to $20. So once again,
wow,
you squeeze out, $20 Big Mac. What about the families that are broke and they don't have a lot of money, and occasionally they want to grab a Big Mac? They can't even afford a Big Mac anymore. I mean,
a small fries, I think, is already up to around $3.
What was that?
Yeah. I said, I think an order of small fries is already close to $3, by the way. I had that experience the other day. Absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, but what else are they going to do, Frank? Well, what else? Because, when I was a little girl, we had a garden, all right? And I used to love that we had all these extra vegetables, tomatoes. And my dad would let me sell them. I'd take them around a little red wagon and sell them. And I'd take the money and take my cousins out for ice cream. And you learn the very basic economics, which they refuse to teach our children and they refuse to live by. That a product is only worth as much as somebody can pay for it. So everybody hurts. The consumers hurt. the college kids now, they don't have a job that they can go to. But people trying to be an actor that they want to go in and they want to work as a bartender. They can't find any work now because nobody's hiring. Even a doctor. I spoke with my doctor. This is going to freak you out, Frank. My doctor has his own practice. I won't say his name. He said the minimum wage is killing him and that most of his friends, his doctor friends, are joining the corporations because they cannot afford the liability insurance and the cost of minimum wage for front desk to remain their own practice. It affects everybody. And it all has to get passed on to the consumer, which eliminates middle class, lower middle class. Literally, only rich people will be able to go to McDonald's.
Yeah. Now, what about the use of robots and
shameful.
technology? I was at a restaurant over the weekend where all of a sudden a robot came down the aisle with delivering the food, and then a human server took the plates off that robot. Would you ever consider using something like that? And what other things are you hearing about in the face of all this?
As a small business owner, I've done everything I can to maintain my staff. One of my things, especially when the pandemic happened, is that my kitchen staff their entire family has been with me since 1978. But yes, I've looked at a pizza vending machine, maybe to cut back hours and then have some food available and just have a bartender. I've looked at anything and everything I can without completely letting go of the people I'm trying to protect. And that's the other thing. The corporations, the fast food restaurants, the ones that are owned by mom and pop, that we do all we can to keep our staff employed and making a good income. It is not to our advantage to have cut hours and then have our cook working 3 jobs. That does not make our business better. But do you
Angela, we'll have to stop there as always. I wish we had more time. We'll have to stop there, but we'll look forward to your show on Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Angela MARSDEN, the owner of the Pineapple Hill Saloon and Grill in Sherman Oaks, host of SOS Los Angeles, Family Food and the Little Guy, airing here on 790 KBC Saturdays at 1. This is Mottek on Money. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Royal Oaks. This is 790 KBC.
What companies deserve your hard-earned dollar? Which would you want to work for? How can you know if they share your values? Just ask us. Just Capital is a nonprofit that tracks who really means business in supporting workers, customers, communities, the environment, and shareholders. We measure progress, track success, and help them be better. When you see the Just Capital seal, you know what's real, because just business is better business. Visit justcapital.com to learn who makes your dollar count.